The sacred selection hall gleamed with polished stone, its high ceilings amplifying every whisper into a thunderous judgment. Kalia stood tall among her fellow candidates, her silver-blue skin catching the ceremonial lights, while her six-fingered hands remained perfectly still at her sides. Unlike the others, whose eyes darted anxiously around the chamber, Kalia kept her gaze forward, her large, almond-shaped purple eyes fixed on the selection council. Candidate Kalia Tebris, announced the chief geneticist, her voice echoing through the hall. Step forward for final assessment. Kalia moved with the grace that had earned her top marks at the Academy of Diplomatic Sciences. Her long limbs carried her forward in the smooth gait her people, the Valorians, considered the hallmark of superior breeding. She had excelled in every test: intelligence, resilience, adaptability. Only this final physical assessment remained. The scanning beam hummed as it passed over her body, projecting a three-dimensional image of her skeletal structure before the council. Kalia watched their expressions shift from professional detachment to something worse: pity. Candidate Tebris, the chief geneticist said, her voice softer now. Your pelvic structure shows a deviation of 4.8% from the acceptable range for successful reproduction. The words hit Kalia like physical blows. She had suspected, had always known something wasn't quite right, but had hoped her other qualities would outweigh this defect. The assessment is conclusive, continued the geneticist. You are declared unfit for the continuation line. A murmur rippled through the other candidates. Someone behind her whispered, all that promise, wasted on defective bones. Kalia's throat tightened, but she would not show weakness. I understand the council's decision, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I accept the assessment. The High Counselor stepped forward, her ancient face a mask of practiced compassion. Kalia Tebris, in recognition of your exceptional academic achievements, the Council offers you a position of honor. You will serve as cultural liaison to the human colony on Nexus 9. This posting will allow you to serve Valorian interests while accommodating your limitations. Translation: exile. A way to remove her from society while pretending it was a reward. Humans were considered crude, emotional creatures by most Valorians, fascinating in their resilience, but ultimately primitive. Being sent to them was barely one step above being designated for menial labor. 2 weeks later, Kalia stood in the sterile departure chamber of the interstellar transport, watching her homeworld shrink through the viewport. She carried with her only essential belongings and a medical file that reduced her entire being to a single measurement. Defective, she whispered to herself, testing the word's sharp edges against her tongue. For 26 cycles, she had done everything right, studied harder, achieved more, shown perfect discipline. None of it mattered because her hips, the cradle of new life for her species, were deemed too narrow by 4.8%. The ship's AI announced their approach to the jump point. In moments, she would leave Valorian space entirely. Kalia took one last look at the glittering blue planet below. Goodbye, she said to everything she had ever known. I won't miss how you made me feel. With a flash of light, the ship jumped. Kalia closed her eyes, letting the sensation of molecular displacement wash over her. When she opened them again, she would be in human space, a place where, perhaps, being defective would hurt less than it did among her own kind. Nexus 9 wasn't what Kalia expected. Instead of the sterile, utilitarian outpost described in her briefings, the human colony sprawled across a verdant valley, structures blending with the natural landscape rather than dominating it. Welcome to Nexus 9, Liaison Tebris, said the colony administrator, a short woman with dark skin and silver-streaked hair. I'm Director Pottle. We're honored to host you. Kalia performed the formal Valorian greeting, arms extended, palms up. The honor is mine, Director. I look forward to facilitating understanding between our peoples. If Director Patel noticed the slight tremor in Kalia's hands, she didn't mention it. Your quarters are ready. Tomorrow, Dr. Torres will show you the research facilities. He's eager to meet you. Her quarters were spacious, decorated with both human and Valorian artifacts, a thoughtful touch. Still, as night fell, Kalia found herself standing before the mirror, examining her reflection. The elegant height, the blue-silver skin that shifted subtly with her emotions, the large purple eyes, all traits considered beautiful among her people. Then her gaze drifted lower, to the hips deemed too narrow for childbearing. 4.8%, she whispered. My entire value reduced to a number. Morning brought a soft chime at her door. Outside stood a human man, tall for his species, with warm brown skin, curly black hair, and eyes the color of amber. His smile created small creases at their corners. Lees and Tevries, I'm Dr. Elian Torres, Xenobiology and Cultural Studies. He extended his hand, then quickly withdrew it. Sorry, I've read that Valorians prefer non-contact greetings. That is correct, Kalia confirmed, secretly impressed by his knowledge. Though I am familiar with human customs if you prefer. Let's find middle ground, Elian suggested, his voice warm. I'm here to learn as much as to teach. As they toured the research facility, Kalia noticed how different Elian was from Valorian scientists. He moved with casual energy, stopping to greet colleagues, asking questions instead of delivering pronouncements. Most surprisingly, he asked for her opinions. What do you think of our approach to ecosystem integration? He asked as they observed a simulation of native and Earth-originated plant species. It's unstructured, Kalia admitted. Valorian science would identify optimal combinations rather than allowing natural selection. Instead of being offended, Elian nodded thoughtfully. We found that perfection sometimes emerges from imperfection. The unexpected adaptations often yield the most resilient systems. Something in his words resonated painfully within her. And if the system fails? Then we learn from the failure, he said simply. Nothing and no one is without value in the pursuit of understanding. Later, sharing a meal in the colony's central garden, Kalia found herself relaxing in Elian's presence. He asked about Valorian culture without judgment, listened intently to her answers, and shared stories of his own world with infectious enthusiasm. Why did you come to Nexus 9? She asked finally. It's quite remote for humans. Elian's smile turned wistful. I never quite fit the mold back on Earth. Too interested in questions others thought irrelevant. Too willing to challenge established theories. He shrugged. Sometimes you have to leave home to find where you truly belong. For the first time since her exile began, Kalia felt something unfamiliar, a connection, tentative but real. In Elian's presence, the shame of her defect seemed somehow less overwhelming. I understand, she said softly. More than you know. 3 months into her assignment, Kalia found herself increasingly drawn to Elian's company. They worked together daily, studying the complex interactions between Valorian and human biological systems, each bringing their cultural perspective to the research. Today, they were alone in the lab, analyzing tissue compatibility samples. Kalia watched as Elian bent over a microscope, his hands steady and sure. Those hands fascinated her, only 5 fingers instead of 6, yet capable of such precise, gentle movements. Remarkable, he murmured. Your cellular regeneration rate is nearly triple ours. A necessity for space travel, Kalia explained, moving closer. Our ancestors engineered resistance to radiation damage. Elian looked up, his amber eyes alight with curiosity. Engineered. That's what fascinates me about Valorians, the deliberate evolution. Some would say it's our greatest achievement, Kalia said carefully. Perfect biological efficiency. And the cost? Elian asked, his voice gentle. What happens to those who don't meet the standard? The question pierced her practiced composure. Kalia turned away, her skin shifting to a deeper blue, a sign of distress she couldn't hide. Forgive me, Elian said immediately. I overstepped. No, Kalia whispered. It's a valid question. She took a steadying breath. Those who fail to meet standards are reassigned. Their genetic material is not added to the continuation line. Like you. Elian's voice held no judgment, only compassion. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Kalia nodded. My pelvic structure is deemed unsuitable for reproduction. I am defective. She expected scientific detachment or awkward sympathy. Instead, Elian's expression shifted to incredulity. May I scan you? For research purposes only, he added quickly. Bewildered, Kalia consented. Elian activated the holographic imaging system, creating a three-dimensional rendering of her skeletal structure. This is what they rejected you for, he asked, studying the image. The deviation is 4.8% from ideal, Kalia said, the number burned into her memory. Elian shook his head, eyes still on the scan. From a human perspective, your structure is remarkably efficient. The slight narrowing actually appears to enhance your overall biomechanical efficiency. He looked up at her. You're not defective, Kalia. You're specialized. Something broke inside her. A dam holding back years of shame and inadequacy. Then why wasn't I enough? She whispered, her voice cracking. Without warning, Elian stepped forward and did the unthinkable. He embraced her. For a moment, Kalia froze, unused to such contact. Then, slowly, she relaxed into his warmth. Because sometimes, he said softly against her hair, cultures value uniformity over uniqueness. But here, with me, you're not measured by percentages. Later that night, in the privacy of Elian's quarters, their conversation continued, evolving into something more profound. His touch, gentle, reverent, explored her flawed body as if discovering treasure. Where her people had seen deviation, he saw beauty. You're sacred, he whispered against her skin. Every curve, every molecule. For the first time in her life, Kalia surrendered control, allowed herself to be truly seen. In Elian's arms, she wasn't a failed specimen, but a woman, whole and desired. Their joining transcended biology, becoming a revelation that love could exist beyond the boundaries of worlds and species. Afterward, lying beside him, watching the twin moons of Nexus 9 through the viewport, Kalia realized she had found something her perfect world had never offered. Belonging. A delegation from the Valorian High Council will arrive tomorrow. Director Patil announced, her usual calm demeanor strained. They wish to evaluate the cultural liaison program. The news hit Kalia like a physical blow. 6 months into her exile, her sanctuary, and now they were coming. Her fingers instinctively found Elian's beneath the conference table. What exactly are they evaluating? Elian asked, his voice carefully neutral. Director Patil glanced at Kalia. Officially, the diplomatic value of the program. Unofficially, there are rumors of a policy shift regarding genetic standards. After the meeting, Kalia paced their shared quarters, her skin cycling through shades of distress. They're coming to verify their decision, she said, to prove I'm better off exiled. Elian caught her hands, stilling her movement, or they're reconsidering. Kalia, your research here has been groundbreaking. The cellular regeneration protocols alone. They won't care, she interrupted. Science was never the point. Control was. Then we show them what they've lost through control, Elian said firmly. We show them you. The Valorian delegation arrived with typical precision. 3 council representatives in formal attire, their expressions glacial. Chief geneticist Valmore led them, her eyes sweeping critically over the human facility. Lees and Tevries, she acknowledged Kalia with minimal courtesy. You appear functional in this environment. Kalia performed the formal greeting, fighting to keep her hands steady. The assignment has been most illuminating, Chief Geneticist. Indeed, we will require a complete report on your activities, privately. Before Kalia could respond, Elian stepped forward. Dr. Elian Torres, research partner to Lees and Tevries. We've scheduled a demonstration of our joint findings. Perhaps that would provide context for your discussions. The chief geneticist's expression tightened. The human speaks for you now, Tevries. Something ignited in Kalia. Anger, pride, defiance. Dr. Torres speaks as my equal, chief geneticist, as is appropriate between collaborators. In the laboratory, Kalia and Elian presented their research with seamless coordination. The regeneration protocols, the environmental adaptation studies, the cross-species medical applications, each breakthrough undermining the notion that Kalia was somehow lesser. Your work is adequate, the chief geneticist conceded. However, your primary purpose was never reproduction. Kalia interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. My purpose is to expand knowledge, to build connections, and I have done so more effectively here than I ever could have within the constraints of Valorian society. The room fell silent. Even Elian looked stunned at her declaration. You forget yourself, Tevries, one of the counselors said coldly. Your assignment was a courtesy, not a choice. No, Kalia said, drawing herself to her full height. My exile was a punishment for a flaw that exists only in Valorian definitions. Here, I am valued for my mind, my adaptability. She reached for Elian's hand, holding it openly. And my capacity for connection. The chief geneticist's gaze fixed on their joined hands. You have formed an attachment to this human. I have formed a partnership, Kalia replied. One based on mutual respect rather than genetic percentages. You would choose exile. Choose him over your people. Elian squeezed her hand but remained silent, letting her fight her own battle. I choose a life where I am not reduced to measurements, Kalia said firmly. And I am not alone. There are others like me, brilliant minds discarded because their bodies didn't conform to an arbitrary standard. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the chief geneticist's face. Others have expressed similar sentiments. Hope flared within Kalia. Perhaps she wasn't just speaking for herself after all. 1 year after the Valorian delegation's visit, Kalia stood on the observation deck of Nexus 9, watching a shuttle descend through the atmosphere. Beside her, Elian's presence was a steady comfort. Nervous? He asked, his hand finding the small of her back. Terrified, she admitted, but ready. The shuttle carried 5 Valorian scientists, all deemed unsuitable for reproduction, all brilliant in their fields. They were the first wave of what was being called the Nexus Initiative, a radical program allowing genetically divergent Valorians to pursue research partnerships with humans. Your rebellion started this, Elian said softly. You changed everything. Kalia smiled, thinking of the past year's upheaval. After her confrontation with the delegation, others had spoken out, first in whispers, then in formal petitions. The genetic standards hadn't been abolished, but alternatives had been created for those who failed to meet them. Options besides shame and isolation. We changed it together, she corrected him. I never would have found my voice without you. As they walked to the landing pad, Kalia reflected on how far she had come from that humiliated woman in the sacred selection hall. Her work with Elian had earned recognition across 2 worlds. Their regeneration protocols were saving lives, and their relationship, once scandalous, was becoming a symbol of a new era in human-Valorian relations. The shuttle doors opened. The 5 scientists emerged, their expressions a mixture of uncertainty and hope, so familiar to Kalia that her heart ached with recognition. Welcome to Nexus 9. She greeted them in formal Valorian, then switched to the informal mode rarely used in official settings. Welcome home. Later, after the new arrivals were settled, Kalia and Elian retreated to their quarters, the home they had built together, blending both their cultures. Elian drew her close, his hands moving to her hips, the very feature her people had rejected. Have I told you today how perfect you are? He murmured against her neck. Kalia laughed softly. Perfection is overrated. I prefer being sacred. Sacred imperfection. Elian agreed, his touch reverent. The most beautiful kind. As they came together, human and Valorian, scientist and exile, man and woman. Kalia thought of the journey that had brought her here, how being cast out had led her to belonging, how being deemed unworthy had led her to being cherished. "I love you," she whispered against his lips, words that had no direct translation in formal Valorian, but which she had learned to say in the language of her heart. "And I love you," Elian replied, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the universe, every perfect 4.8% of you. In his arms, Kalia knew the truth that would forever guide their work and their lives. That worth was not measured in percentages or reproductive capacity, but in courage, connection, and the willingness to see beauty where others saw only deviation. Their love had become a bridge between worlds, proof that sometimes the most sacred things are found not in perfection, but in the spaces where we dare to be gloriously, beautifully imperfect.